Welcome, cartilaginous and bony organisms, to another episode of the Uncannery. I am Ron, your host today, and to my left, I am joined by
Doug, and I welcome you even if you don't have bones. I thought that wasn't the most inclusive.
I included the cartilaginous.
What if we're just goo?
No, don't want goo.
All right.
No goos.
Anybody who's a fan of The Blob 1954, I think it was? Might be wrong on the year. I apologize if The Blob is listening. Anyway.
Don't need no blob. And to my right is...
I'm Don.
Not a blob, Don.
Great.
We're gonna have some fun today, folks. I really need to bring the mood up. It's been one of those weeks, Doug and Don, and so I really wanted to start us off by thinking about the incredible. All right, an incredible experience. You ever been somewhere maybe late at night, maybe in the early morning, maybe a location, a hotel, a farm far away from your local bed that you alight upon every night, and through a twilight or a fogginess of mindset, did you have an experience that caused you to question your very own senses?
In the loaming, if you were?
Yes, the loaming period.
No.
Oh, okay. Doug, save this.
Have a great day. So in my time being a touring musician, I remember looking up at Red Rocks Amphitheater. And if you're not familiar with this venue, it is on both sides. You're covered in it's the side of a mountain that they've built a venue in, Red Rock Mountain. And I remember looking out at the stars and completely stopping what I was doing. It wasn't necessarily a very supernatural experience, but just the awe and moment of the beauty of the space completely made me forget what I was doing at the time, to the point that I kind of like shut down most faculties and just like had to take a moment to drink it in. And I know there have been similar experiences where people have kind of talked about the sublimity of nature, and that was a very profound moment for me. I think about that, but no ghosts. Maybe a ghost. Hey, maybe I was inhabiting.
You were, yeah. You got
It was
Patrick
either-
Swayze there.
Yeah. It was either the aliens from Area 51 or
Hopefully.
ADHD could be.
Yeah.
Knowing me.
We'll never know.
Knowing me, we do know. And it's option 2. Yeah, it's definitely option 2. But
Really clever names there, too. Red Rock Amphitheater is built into the Red Rock Mountain. Let me guess what color the rock is.
you'd be shocked.
Vermilion.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say burnt orange.
Can't call it vermilion, Ted. No one wants to spell that.
Yeah.
I've got one minor kind of. I've always wanted an experience, right? That I could like tell people, right? Like
Don't we all?
It's like a fishing story, right? The perfect fishing story. Like you want something kind of impressive, something you can reel out at a party. But I think the only one I really have was once when like I was like a teenager and I had my driver's license. I used to just like driving around late at night, listen to music, whatever. And I was driving around probably around 2 a.m. or so. It was an empty road, and to my left was a cemetery. And in the road ahead of me, caught in my headlights, was a person, right, dressed all in white. And they were walking from the right-hand side of the road to the left-hand side of the road, into the cemetery, crossing the road, and not at a crosswalk, I might say, or a walking juncture.
Wow.
But they were far enough ahead of me that I didn't really need to they weren't like and I crashed into them, or there was no risk of that. But they were, and I did kind of a double take, like what? And my heart started racing, and I was
And then you looked in the rearview mirror, and she was in the back seat.
yeah.
Was it by any chance October 31st?
It was nowhere. Actually, I couldn't say. I have no memory of when this was. If
I
had
was
to guess,
very tired on Halloween.
It was probably the summer. I'm assuming that's probably when you do most of your late night driving. You're not driving a lot when you have school the next day. And that's my only real kind of like ghost story.
I did have a similar, it's not very interesting, I don't think, but it's similar to that, I guess. But it was after my, it didn't meet any of the requirements of your story that you were listing for us. It wasn't far away from my home. It actually was in my home.
Oh,
right outside.
spookier.
Outside my bedroom after my my father passed away, and it was like about 2 or 3 weeks worth of like double takes and like motions out of the corner of your eye and just like the right shape in the hallway. Just kind of sensing that he was still hanging around, I guess, a little bit. I don't know if that was then, in my brain, like I was super excited because like missed him, but also like,
oh, hey, quick, what's your password?
But also wondering if it's just my brain manifesting that because I was missing him, right? If it was my own creation or if it was actually an encounter with the supernatural.
Yeah. To be fair, very similar experience. Grandma passed away. And I remember having an experience in a kid where I really thought, and I guess that's why I didn't think about it until right now, but I don't, it's hard to say when you're a kid, because you're so in tune with things, but then yet everything is like so much more heightened with where your brain is developing. But I remember thinking like, oh, she's in the room and she's saying goodbye. Like I very much, nothing physical, nothing in particular, but just like an overall feeling. But then, the psychologist shows up and says, well, it was your way of...
Your kid has ADHD.
He's never going to be able to play a concert.
Keep him away from rocks.
What color were they? Oh, yes, he's going to be very, very...
You actually both just remind me, I do have another one. I do have another experience, also from my childhood.
This is not an episode. This is a trauma dump.
Yeah. Please help us work through some things that are reawakening in our minds. But it was also after the death of my grandmother, and I would have been 9 or 10 or so, somewhere around there. And I remember we started going to bed. I shared a room with my brother, and at night I started hearing this ding, and it was like ding, like it had,
it was.
You guys know what a bell sounds like? It wasn't like a dong, and it wasn't like a tink, but it was like a ding. And but what I meant was that it had a tempo, it had a reliability about it, right? Like it was always at the same time. And I remember
it was grandma's alarm clock that she didn't turn off.
I remember like going to my mom the next morning, or like this happened over several nights. I was like, Mom, like you need to come into my room. I think like grandma's in there. She's ringing a bell because ghosts love bells or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So my mom came in and she did. She like sat there and she listened. And she's like, okay, yeah, I hear it. I was like, cool, I'm not crazy. And then the next morning she, I think the next morning she was like, I think I know what the bell is. And it turned out we had this like night light that was it was like a big tall night light in the shape of a street light. And it would kind of just flash different, red, yellow, green. And every time it changed, it dinged.
Dude, your grandma turned on the light. Wow. That's crazy.
It's an actual manifestation.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that was my first also sort of skeptical moment, right? Or skeptical whiplash, as it were, right? Oh, like the world isn't as magical as my mind construed it perhaps to be.
Yeah.
So I Don, you mentioned, that question of, did I manifest this, right? Or was this a phenomenon of the waking world, right? And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. And I wanted to talk about it, not about ghosts at all. Ha, fooled you, listener. I want to talk about aliens, because this is the thing I've always wanted to see. I'm like...
Yeah, of course.
Doug, I feel like you definitely grew up watching alien stuff. Don, like... I'm not saying they didn't have aliens when you grew up, but I feel like maybe your media was less alien oriented.
Remember aliens, Don?
Yeah, we had papyrus that described the aliens back then. Yeah.
Remember stone tablets?
How do you think we built the pyramids?
Yeah. Did you? But like, was alien media important to you? Right? Like, we had Independence Day and. I guess the movie Alien and like History Channel was already doling out like alien stuff like it was World War II levels of credibility. Yeah. Right. Like, what was your alien upbringing?
Yeah, no, they were all over. There's The Last Starfighter, but what's the one I'm thinking of? What's the alien?
Enemy Mine.
Enemy Mine.
Yeah,
is the one I'm
Dennis
thinking
Quaid.
of. Yeah, that's the one that I had. And then on TV we had V with the rotten milk, and so yeah, aliens is absolutely
But did you want to see aliens?
Oh,
Did
like,
you
did I
think?
want to-
Did you think aliens were real? I guess is a better. Did all of us think when we were children, and then we'll come back and revisit as adults? I don't want to give up the.
And see, I was thinking we break a rule. I feel like the Uncannery has done a great job of like, well, let's explore and leave options. But I am very.
I want to be linear as shit.
Yeah. Just keep it simple. Yeah. I very much want to know where you gentlemen stand on is there life in this universe besides I very much.
Okay.
Yeah. I think you have to wait to the end of the episode to find out.
Yeah, because they're just going to click off.
We have to get the listens.
Yeah. He likes him. He doesn't. Goodbye.
All right.
I believe in our audience.
Can we divide this into two
I
questions?
think we could pause recording right now and I'll write down what we think the others think, and then we could revisit that at the end of the episode and see if we're
That's not a terrible idea. That's not a terrible idea. Yeah.
Can we break it into two questions? Because I think there are two questions that I feel very differently about. So, Doug, you said, do we think there is extraterrestrial life in this universe?
Yep.
Right? But I think that's separate from the question, has that life visited our Earth?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I will say happily, I don't think this is a spoiler, but I do think there is extraterrestrial life in the universe.
We just lost half of our listeners.
Come back.
Gone.
Click off.
I changed my mind.
Yeah. But wait till Don says something.
Yeah. But I feel like that's a pretty commonly held viewpoint. I don't think that's that controversial to say. The sheer size of the universe, right, and our understanding of the mechanism by which life can occur in it suggests that that's not impossible. That there's a greater than 0% chance that other organisms have grown, whether those are even bacterial organisms or intelligent organisms. They're somewhere out there. Do we all agree on this statement?
Don won't say because we have to stay in the unknown to keep the listener. I 100% agree. Yeah, I think that I just statistically, right? Like it's just so wild to think of the ever expanding universe and to kind of have the idea that we would be alone is fairly wild. And then I think to take that to another step is like, I kind of think conceptually, and maybe this is just so influenced by the episodes of Star Trek that I've seen, but it's like just thinking about the different ways that you look at like kind of the cosmic place of us and then like what the purpose is within that, which is a whole different rabbit hole. But thinking about other beings like living or just even bacteria that we find on other planets, things like that. Yes, I think that we continue to expand out.
Well, the questions raised by the Fermi paradox, right? Like the answer seems easy because the universe is so vast that the probabilities of all of the collisions and chemistry that's happening throughout the universe, it must have happened in another place other than just here on Earth. But the paradox, the Fermi paradox says that if that's the case, why have we not encountered them or seen evidence of them or anything like that? The thing that I've recently come across, although it's not new by any means, is called the zoo theory. Have you guys heard about the zoo?
Oh yeah.
So that we're being observed. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it was proposed by John Ball in 1973, but it had been explored a little bit in fiction by some authors before then. But yeah, the idea that we have been found, we just don't know we've been found because we're the subjects in like this wildlife preserve, and we're being kept from the interaction of the aliens, so that way they can study us or see us, and then we don't have the interaction. So,
but if that were true, then why have we seen so many aliens? Because
you just said you didn't see any.
Well, I haven't seen it, but people, the collective humanity has seen so many aliens over the years, Don, and there's no arguing with the fact that we know types of aliens, we know species of aliens, we know where some of them live or come from. There are so many types of aliens. We can't be in a zoo. They're clearly showing up and being like, what's up?
We finished the EVE Online episode. That one's over, right?
We also finished the Bigfoot one. So, Ron, are you taking us down a similar path here?
I want to talk about, there are so many. So I grew up really loving aliens, and like the first books I checked out from the library were all like nonfiction UFO and alien books.
Cool.
Right. And I remember one in particular was just telling me stories about encounters people have had with aliens. And it like blew my mind. I remember like reading it on a camping trip with my dad, and I was like, Dad, did you know that like in 1975, a saucer landed outside of a small town in Peru, and it released a green gas, and these lizard creatures came out, and the whole town was sick? The whole town was sick, Dad. They have evidence. Everyone was sick. What could have caused that? My dad was like, that's just not true. And I was so mad at him.
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? This book, it was like the first time I realized you can just put whatever you want in a book and call it nonfiction. The teacher told me nonfiction was true stuff, Don. How could this book make up a story?
Your dad was more of a Scully at the end of the day.
Oh, definitely.
Teachers are totally unreliable. You can't trust anything a teacher says.
Agreed.
Yeah, they oversimplify everything just to fits their rules.
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about the progression of alien sightings, right? Because I think this tells us something about the different ages of people and where we are sort of collectively, psychically, emotionally, culturally, right? The earliest alien like experiences, like when do you think they like happen? Like when are the first UFOs? When did these happen? Like people actually seeing and reporting UFOs?
I mean, I'm instantly thinking of the meme of the guy with the ancient aliens haircuts. I'm instantly going to that. So I would imagine we're seeing paintings that we can't describe, cave paintings that we can't describe, and inscriptions, and going, it's got to be aliens. That's what they saw.
So that's definitely like a school of thought in ufology, right? The study of unidentified flying objects,
right.
Which I think is like they're not UFOs anymore. Now they're like aerial UFAP. It's way worse. It's a way worse acronym nowadays. But I think a lot of that stuff is like ascribed from like the perspective of the 2000s. Like, as far as I can tell, like, yes, sometimes people see weird lights and stuff in the skies and they report on them in like the 16th century or something, but it's like they're usually meteors or, just sort of like not so phenomenal aerial phenomenon, right? The first like real UFOs like are a product of like the mid 20th century, right? Like World War II, that kind of era moving onwards, right? We start seeing UFOs in the skies and stuff like this.
Oh, I think it goes back a lot further than that.
Really? How much further?
The earliest that I can find is ancient Mesopotamia.
There we go.
Give us the description.
So the Sumerians in 4000 BC are writing about the Anunnaki, who are beings that descend from the sky or from the stars. And it's in relatively like legendary text, right? It's in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So it's well recorded as an ancient source. But there's the ancient Egyptians have similar circles of fire stories that exist from at least 3000 BC. Indians, the ancient Indians have stories about a text about flying machines existing from 2000 BC. So it goes back really far. This idea that there's this, and this is going to take us off on a tangent, I think, but
I don't think there was any way we weren't going to do that on this episode.
Doug said we were not exploring this episode.
Right.
Please follow my script.
Yeah.
But that idea that there's a being coming from the sky, like it's always been from the sky. Like why are there beings coming from the sky and not from underneath the earth when, to an ancient civilization, like under the earth would have been as legitimate of a mystery as above, but all of the stories are coming from the same location. They're all coming from the stars, from the skies. And you think back to I know that the ancient Babylonians had like a sense of the universe, and they were able to map the stars and the calendar and all that. So, but the way that sky was created, like it didn't allow for as much distance as we today know exists up there. So, I think that's interesting that all of those stories are coming from the same spot, and it even fits into our language. Because the Roman god Jupiter, the king of the gods, right? It's actually a compound word coming out of Proto-Indo-European languages. The Pater part of it actually is the same root as the root for father, pater.
Oh, okay.
And so,
Yeah.
So Jupiter actually,
Jupe father.
it means sky. It means sky father.
Father of the jukeberry.
In Proto-Indo-European, which is the language that we don't have any actual record of, but that they are recreating by finding similarities in European languages. So it's a language that pre-exists any of the current languages that we know of.
Let's not just get off the path. Let's go ahead and destroy it at this point.
No!
Let's nuke it. And,
I did so much work to build that path.
we're never coming back. I instantly was thinking about, are we familiar with the biblical reference to the Nephilim?
Yeah. We love me some Nephilim.
Yeah, it's really fun.
This is the coolest stuff in the Bible, right? The monsters and the weird,
pretty
the
fun.
people who screwed aliens and made creatures.
Yeah, so for them, it's for them celestial beings, right? And so there's this idea, and it's very briefly mentioned, but the idea of these absolutely gigantic people that had fraternized, if you will, with humans. And then, like people who are going with the really wild alien theories, they're going to say like, well, that was, and they'll go into all of this territory. We're obsessed with the idea of came from, usually the sky.
But I don't ascribe a lot of that stuff to UFOs, honestly. Like, yes, is there a link there? People descending from the sky, of course. But to me, that has its roots more in just like a sort of like just legendary material, the mythic in general, right? The sort of like who's the mask guy? You know, the freaking. Who am I thinking of?
Phantom of the Opera.
No. The scholar,
Jason,
the hero of 1,000 faces. Who am I thinking of?
Joseph Campbell.
Thank you. Right, Campbell and the Golden Bough and all these theories that link how humans across culture, across times, like have all these similarities.
Archetypes.
Right. Yes, exactly. Right. To me, that's just like a human archetype, right? The sky is always superior to underground because the sky is inaccessible, right? And the sky provides so much more to humanity than beneath the earth, right? Beneath the earth is where we bury our dead. It's the dead land. It's Hades, right? And
until
of course,
H.G. Wells gets hold of it. Then
the Mylocks, what are they called?
The Morlocks.
Morlocks, yeah.
That's the time machine, but also Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't count that as alien stuff though. Like I don't think angels are proof of aliens. I don't think like ancient beings coming from the sky, the Anunnaki. That's not aliens to me. That's just
agreed
myth stuff, right?
And I'm with you on that. Yeah, like but what I find interesting is that there are people that will say it isn't angels, it has to be aliens. Like that is interesting, right? To me, that people.
And when does that transformation occur? And to me, that's why I think of UFOs being a strictly 20th century phenomenon because of this combination of science and technology and like the shrinking of the imaginary world and the expanding of the observable world. And so now, instead of there being celestial beings in the sky, we need scientific observable organisms in the sky. Right? And so some of the first of these are like, do you remember back when we were talking about racist D&D and I said, hey, in racist Star Frontiers, you can play any of a number of very exciting species. And
Nordic or a
Nordic or a Negro. Yeah. So Nordics were like some of the first aliens that were documented by people reporting to have encounters with aliens. This was like a term. These were Nordic aliens because they were always described as being very tall, 7 to 8 foot tall white people with blonde hair. And I think like the first guy to kind of describe these was a Polish American author named George Adamski, and he said he was like in the desert in California and with a couple of friends, and a cigar shaped saucer came down and landed outside the desert, and a man came out and he was blonde and wearing moccasins, and he said his name was Orthon, and he gave George a warning. He said, you guys gotta cool out this Cold War stuff, man. Like nuclear bombs are bad. Right.
What else was he doing in the desert? Because it sounds like there might have been some extra
with a cigar shape.
Yeah, definitely just hanging out with friends and talking about their 401k. I don't know. George Adamski is very much considered like a hoaxster. Like he was like into occult stuff back in the 1920s. Like dude actually like was like fighting Pancho Villa during the Mexican Revolution and stuff. Like lived a pretty crazy and cool life, but also just like trying to sell anything he could.
Wow, man.
And so he became like a UFO guy somewhere in the 1940s and 50s. The problem with because George Adamski popularized this idea of the Nordic aliens, other people across America and Europe like reported like, oh yes, I too saw an alien. And there's like commonalities in all these reports. They're all blonde, they're all nice, they're all benevolent, and they're all like super obsessed with the Cold War. These aliens are always like, you guys, you're gonna ruin yourselves. You're gonna blow up your planet. Please heed our warning.
Rocky got knocked out by Dolph
Ivan.
Is that right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Ivan Drago. I will break you.
But like, can you think of a reason why like everyone in the 40s and 50s would be seeing benevolent white people telling them, please don't shoot the nukes?
You got to have something to pin it on, don't you? All that anxiety and fear. So
yeah, right. It's like clearly speaks to a sort of societal angst. And not only that, in 1951, a movie came out called The Day the Earth Stood Still. And any idea what the message of the aliens is in The Day the Earth Stood Still?
Don't overbake your brownies.
we're not going to move this earth until you guys do what we say.
No, again, they're benevolent aliens who say, don't shoot nukes. You guys are very close to destroying your world.
They're very wise aliens.
They are, and they're played by a white guy. Who, like
One of the Nords.
So, like, this theme I kept seeing in, like, you know, whenever people start seeing a new type or want to catalog a new species of alien, there was, like, a movie that came out 2 years before this that depicted the alien this way, and then it kind of like infiltrates the popular imagination. Like,
so you think that the people aren't actually experiencing these encounters with aliens?
I don't
just
think
remembering a movie they saw.
Well, I want to come back to that question, right? Because that's an important question. But if I were to ask you guys to draw an alien, what are you going to, what's today's alien? What are we going to draw?
It's not gonna. It doesn't work for me because I love the xenomorph from Ridley Scott's Alien so much. That's forever stuck in my mind. So it's H.R. Geiger,
and that's absolutely not alien to me. I
I
know the movie, but I mean, to me, very much it's robot. I know it's not, but like the way it's depicted in the film, like it's very mechanical.
Okay, yeah.
So no, I'm gonna draw gray. Like that's
a gray. What's a gray alien, Don?
Gray alien has the large eyes with the kind of almond shape. They're shorter in stature, kind of elongated bodies, sort of like oddly, their bodies are more like toddler proportions. Like the size of their head is too big, and their bodies are small. And but the ones that come waddling out of the flying saucer in the cartoons and stuff. Like,
exactly. And this is like the next phase of the alien that people encounter, right? Like the gray alien. And this is, from what I could tell, kind of was popularized in 1961. There's a famous abduction that occurs in 1961. Are either of you familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill abduction?
No.
Oh, this is great. This is like the abduction. In 1961, Betty and Barney Hill, they're a married couple. They're a biracial couple in 1961 in New Hampshire. And they decide to have like an impromptu honeymoon. They never had a honeymoon. So they go out for like a weekend drive, and they're driving across, I don't know, somewhere late in New Hampshire. And one night they're like at a coffee shop, and it's like 10 p.m. and they're like, we could probably just make it home. Like if we just beeline it right now, we'll avoid traffic. And I think there's like a storm on the way. So they do that. They're driving late at night. And then suddenly they like start to feel kind of odd. They had remembered seeing these lights in the sky, right? Kind of blinking and following the car. Barney was like in the army, and so he was like, oh, that's like not like any airplane I remember seeing. And then when they get home, they realize that like there was 2 hours they seem to be missing. They have no memory of like, how did we get home? Their shoes are scuffed. Betty says her dress has been torn. Their watches, their wrist watches don't work and never work again. And they just feel very odd and strange. And so they start having these sort of like anxious moments. They feel confused. Betty reports having bad dreams. For a long time, they just sort of like live with this bad feeling, but then trying to research it, Betty goes to the library and she starts looking up books, and eventually she finds books about UFOs and alien encounters and alien abductions. And it's like a couple years later, I want to say it's like 1963 or so, they finally decide to see a psychologist because these symptoms haven't really gone away. They just feel ill. Like, what happened that night? And eventually they meet a psychologist, and he's a hypnotherapist. And so he decides to put them under this kind of burgeoning new field of hypnotherapy. We're going to hypnotize them and see if they can recover any lost memories. And when he does this, they both tell this story about their car being brought to a stop. A spacecraft landed on the road in front of them. Small little gray people with almond-shaped eyes came out of the ship and brought them inside, and they do abduction stuff, right? This is where the idea of like sort of being surgically operated on, being probed, being scanned, being like observed and experimented on comes from. And eventually they do this, and then they let the Barney and Betty go, and then they get back in their car and they completely erase their memories, right? Abduction.
And what was their last name?
Hill. Yeah. Is that an important clue? No.
Well, no, but when you started the story, it said that they're Betty and Barney. I thought it was Betty and Barney Rubble. And Hill and Rubble are not that different.
And don't forget the Flintstones and the Jetsons.
Oh.
Right. Absolutely.
And sometimes they met once.
Actually, are there any... I don't think there are aliens on the Jetsons. It's just robots, isn't it?
Yeah, no,
I was going to say that it's all retrofuturism. Yeah.
But interesting. So, how did she do research on this if they were the first ones to be
So I think there have been stories of alien abductions, right? Like, or encounters with aliens, right? Like even George Adamski said he like went into a spaceship once and they started flying them around the universe, and he went to Jupiter and he went to Venus. He saw the aliens' homeworld on Venus, which is like why even people at the time didn't really take him seriously, because they knew like no one can live on Venus, you moron. But so like this literature exists, right? But this is considered the story that popularizes this idea in the American imagination, because they write a newspaper article about this, and that article becomes a best-selling book. It's called The Interrupted Journey, right? And then they eventually make a movie version of it. It's got James Earl Jones as Barney, right? And so it just sort of like goes out everywhere. And since then, according to like UFO historians, like there's the Nordic aliens are no longer really encountered by people. All sort of reported alien encounters involve these gray aliens. And this kind of culminates in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? Which comes out in the 70s. And the aliens are little, tiny, gray, almond-eyed, children-looking aliens, right?
I was trying to remember the first time that I'd seen it. Yeah, I think that was my first experience seeing them as well.
And a lot of people have tried to obviously explain what possibly could have happened to Betty and Barney. And one of the kind of most interesting finds is that just 2 weeks before they went for their hypnotherapy session,
they ate mushrooms.
They got completely blitzed. You remember there was a television show called The Outer Limits?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Science fiction, sort of Twilight Zone show, right? Well, The Outer Limits aired a series of episodes that all involved alien abductions, and the aliens portrayed in those television shows were almost exactly the aliens that were described by Barney. At least Barney drew the alien that he encountered, and it doesn't quite look like our version of a gray alien, but it is bald. It has these big wraparound eyes. He continually in his session mentions the eyes, the glowing eyes. And that's like also basically a line from the show, like, oh, the eyes of evil and blah, blah, blah. So there's like a succession of 3 episodes that all involve like in one of them, a spaceship lands and stops a car, right? And takes the people inside. And another one, there's like a surgery scene where an alien is trying to turn the people that it captures into like servants and stuff. And Betty and Barney both say like they were, or at least Betty did, that she wasn't like familiar with this show. But it seems uncertain if that's like maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Who can say? But it seems like the running theory is that they've kind of had these images, these ideas imprinted in them prior to having gone into hypnotherapy.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that television show was really well researched and grounded in authentic fact of alien encounter.
Very much so.
And there's also like small differences in their stories. Like they were put in separate sessions, right? And Barney, who was like a veteran of World War II, he described the aliens as looking like Nazis, like they had Nazi uniforms. The leader was very Hitler-esque. Betty described the aliens as nice and actually friendly. She enjoyed talking to them, and they were very kind. Whereas Barney found them more hostile. So it sounds
aliens are just like people. Some people are nice, and some people are not.
I'm gonna say that maybe they were drudging up multiple subconscious experiences and trying to meld them together into a way that makes sense, in a similar way that we might have a dream.
But then, what would have been the so this happened to them together, right? They were traveling together on the road. They had, and whatever this episode is that is causing them to believe or want to believe or to fabricate this memory. Yeah. Right. Like what was there had to have been like some
sort of event, right?
Yeah. Something had to have happened.
The best explanation for this I could find is not super exciting, right? But there is a guy who apparently has lives in the area in which this took place, and he's like spent his whole life trying to counter this story. And apparently nearby there is a beacon, an airplane beacon of sorts that's really tall, and it blinks, and it can look like a UFO if you're like driving through the sky at night or something like that. And secondly, the idea that they were just tired, right? That they were driving while drowsy, and that.
But why would that make them feel bad for like 3 weeks?
That part, I agree. It's odd, right?
Yeah. It's probably
it was the worst coffee you could have had at that coffee stop ever. Somebody put something psychedelic in there. They're like, "We're gonna drive home right now, honey."
And where were they driving again?
New Hampshire. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it's New Hampshire. Yeah, they were trying to get to Portsmouth.
Portsmouth.
So there have also been people who've tried to sort of psychoanalyze them, and something that they also bring up is that Betty and Barney were both sort of civically minded people, and they were participants in the civil rights movement of the early '60s, right? As one of the early openly intermarried couples, right? And that some people have hypothesized that what they were feeling was maybe just like a sort of over anxiety about being watched, being people being hostile to them as a couple, and that in some way that this was just the unease that they were feeling, right? Living during this time in a very white part of the United States, and a potentially very hostile place, and that this manifested in these feelings and this need to explain it. Through finding these UFO explanations.
No. What do you guys remember from your 6th grade memorizing facts about the states of the United States? They're going to New Hampshire. New Hampshire's state bird is the purple finch.
Mourning dove. Oh.
Purple finch?
Yeah.
Portsmouth finch.
What's the nickname of New Hampshire?
The
New Hampshire
state.
It's the granite state.
Okay.
The gray.
That could be red granite. Which means they're driving by red rocks.
Okay.
Which is clearly a sign of aliens, because Doug
something is happening right now in our space, and we are going to need
We're cracking it.
I see something right now. I am being beamed
Orthon!
up. Absolutely. They are speaking to me. Oh, they are speaking to me. Yeah.
So, anyways, I bring this up as this was like the famous gray alien story. Since then, it seems to have replaced the idea of benevolent alien creatures in at least the American imagination, with more hostile alien creatures, right? And then I wanted to get to the most hostile of all, right? Because it gets worse, guys.
The xenomorph from Ridley Scott's Alien.
For some reason, I can't find anything that no one has seen a xenomorph.
Yeah,
this is not.
This is cool.
Influenced aliens.
Haven't you seen Aliens?
I've seen Aliens, but like my big hypothesis is people watch TV, it gets stuck in their brains, and then when they see something they can't explain, they replace it with they go through the Rolodex in their brain and like, oh yeah, the guy from Close Encounters. Oh yeah, the guy from The Day the Earth Stood Still, right? Same way that H.G. Wells loved fairies, right? He didn't see no aliens because no one had drawn a gray alien yet, right? But people were talking about fairies and toadstools. Don, what do you know about fairies?
Don,
I've never been more certain about anything than you know about fairies in the 19th century.
tell us about it.
Just that it was popular to believe in fairies, and they were some of the first, supernatural creatures that scientific proof was provided for, like it's photographic proof.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so it was and there's photographic proof of aliens as well, right?
Of course, yes.
So it's a
famously.
Similar, but I actually think I want to circle back to this idea. So go ahead and tell us about Scary Alien, and then let's circle back to this because I just bring the fairies back up, and because I've got some theories.
Okay. Scariest alien. Have you heard of the reptilians?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Doug, what do you know about the reptilians?
I cannot remember the guy's name.
I can. You want to?
I know it's coming, but it's
David Icke.
David Icke. Okay, there it is. Yeah, it's the idea. You know that celebrity that's doing so well? You know that really rich individual that's influencing the world? Do you know what's behind the skin? Reptile, baby. And we're not talking about the Mortal Kombat character. We're talking about a group of people. Is this where Skinwalkers comes from? Like this idea too of like behind the facade.
I think Skinwalkers have a basis in actual like indigenous American myth, but I do think the sudden fascination with Skinwalkers in the last 20 years is a mutation of the reptilian story. Right. And this reptilian story is exactly what you're saying, Doug. And it's popularized by a guy named David Icke, who in the 1990s, David Icke is still alive. He was a British like sports broadcaster, like a soccer jockey or whatever they call him.
Soccer jock. It's that sock jock, baby.
A football voice man. But and then at some point in the 1990s, he went insane. He said he was like visited by an angel. And that he was told he was
Nephilim.
He had to save humanity by giving them the truth. And he kind of wrote a bunch of books and he tried on lots of different hats. But the thing that I think kind of rocketed him the most was a book in 1999 called what was it called? It was called The Biggest Secret. And The Biggest Secret posits that actually all the rich and powerful people in the world, world leaders, George Bush, Barack Obama didn't exist in 1999. Well, I guess he did, but not in David Icke's.
He did. Well, they hadn't manufactured in that era.
But like Madonna, he said, like any kind of famous person was actually a shape-shifting reptilian alien, and that these reptilian aliens had infiltrated the Earth from like the Draco star system, something stupid.
I don't think like you think about all of the rich and most powerful people that exist in our world right now. Like I can see the similarities.
This is actually
reptile.
This is my problem with it because if you listen to David Icke, at first you're like, oh, it's a fun metaphor, right? That the rich and powerful are, he literally says they like drink the blood of children.
Right.
They shapeshift. They mean us ill. They've formed a powerful cabal and they're trying to enslave us, blah, blah, blah. And if you listen to that and just think of it as like a science fiction story, you're like, yeah, that's pretty, I agree.
Yeah.
Like the powerful people in the world do suck and they don't have our best interests at heart. But he like literally means it. And it's also it's been very credibly stated that there's a lot of anti-Semitism inherent to this message because it trucks in a lot of conspiracy theories that go many centuries back that all involve the idea that, hey, very wealthy people, especially very wealthy Jewish people in Europe, are actually secretly trying to mastermind us and control the world. And there are plenty of statements in Icke's writing that allude to this and that he is playing into this story. He will say when confronted on it that no, he is not anti-Semitic, he is not racist, blah, blah, blah. He's just trying to unveil a true conspiracy of powerful people, and that not all the reptilians are Jews, but a lot of them happen to be. This is cause, I think, very rational criticism of this argument. Besides the fact that probably there are not alien reptiles on this planet who shapeshift into the forms of our government leaders.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be fun to continue to scapegoat the idea, right? Because then it's just like, again, it's another similar okay, like I'm seeing this theme that's running through of like Cold War fear, right? With the Nords, racial the feeling of paranoia and being watched with the Greys, with the couple that you have. And then once again, and I mean, just unfortunately, like looking through the history of anti-Semitism, it's always interesting to me, I think specifically with this one, that it always is under the guise of like, I'm not saying it is just Jewish people. It just happens to be a lot of them, which of course naturally leads to the racist thought of, but it is Jews, and it's fascinating to me looking at this because it's like instantly put in this very not benevolent kind of scope. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Well, and I was just going to say that setting aside the obvious racial component you're bringing up, like the base anxiety there is just there are people that have power that is out of my control.
Correct.
And it's not even worth fighting against because like it's alien power. Like how could I? Right. So it's not just that it's overwhelming amount of wealth and an overwhelming amount of political power and social power, but it's it really underscores that feeling of I don't know, of absolute uselessness in that universe. Like I have no control over my own life because this other race of creature is actually secretly controlling the world.
Yep. And now common enemy, it's the aliens who are doing it. But then it gets scary because it's like, well, and then group of people, and then that leads to other really dark thoughts.
Right. Yeah. And you can kind of link that back to the Nordic alien thing, right? Where the anxiety over the Cold War and potential global annihilation, we need to invent a super powerful from beyond the stars race of people to tell us to be our parents, right? To be like, hey, you guys are really not doing so good. It is that thing that I find interesting. And then I think you laid it out really well, Doug, and David Icke's reptilian aliens, which are, I would say kind of like the new most popular sort of alien. It speaks to like the newer anxieties of like concentrated world power, right? Or like we're concentrated power in general, right? Yeah. Across the world. And I want to play a clip real fast from a documentary I've seen. This is a documentary with John Ronson. You guys ever seen any of his stuff?
No.
He did this really great documentary in 2001 where he basically just wanted to follow David Icke around and let him talk his weird stuff because John Ronson's just kind of interested in weird guys. And he winds up, so David Icke is about to go on a speaking tour in Canada, but there John Ronson also winds up filming a group in Canada called the Canadian Jewish Congress, who wants to stop David Icke from speaking because they're very aware of this anti-Semitic messaging in his texts and in his talks. And so they kind of they launch a campaign to kind of prevent David Icke from speaking, trying to keep him, essentially like start trying to protest outside of radio stations so that the radio stations will cancel his appearances or just physically block him from entering into bookstores. And the campaign goes pretty poorly because it turns out like a lot of Canadians want to hear David Icke talk. For some people, he's just the funny reptile man. But for others, he's speaking truth to power. And at the end of this documentary, I wanted to play this clip because this clip shows the members of this Canadian Jewish Congress kind of talking about the failures of their campaign to stop Icke and what people like about Icke. And I think it is salient today. Would you please play that clip for us, Don?
The strange thing is that many in the coalition share David's conspiracy theories about an evil elite ruling the world. This is what the left-wingers here were battling against in Seattle and Prague. They just don't believe these elitists to be shape-shifting lizards or Jews.
What we do have to remember is out there are lots of people who are undecided on many things that he stands for that sound very progressive. He's against the WTO. I'm against the WTO.
There are very rational explanations of corporate globalization. It's not a conspiracy. Corporations do what they do because they are corporations, and we don't need to imagine conspiracies to explain why they would do everything they possibly can to increase their profits and take away the rights of workers and suppress democracy. That's their business. In fact, that's their only business.
The problem is this. David Icke has become so popular here in Vancouver that those people who don't believe in the lizards are beginning to seem like has-beens.
His views are expressed as the answer. You know what I mean? A lot of, especially young people, are getting involved in these issues, and they're seeing the, this big task before them. And we sort of have the answers as a group of people, but David Icke has the real answer, and it's these conspiracies and their lizards, and that's linked to dehumanizing, the Jewish elite. People who are just finding their ground on these issues are like, don't tell me I'm stupid, I'm looking for some answers, and he seems to have them.
But it is all over for the coalition. By the end of the week, they disband. In getting David banned from radio shows and book signings, the anti-elitists have themselves behaved like a shadowy elite, like the hidden hand, and nobody likes a shadowy elite.
And I think this from 2001 explains a lot of what's happened over the last 20 years, right? I think like David Icke as a man peddling a bizarre and obviously untrue story about reptilian aliens did become popular because a lot of people have that shared anxiety of, I really hate the people in power. Like it is very obvious that they do not care about me. And I will kind of... take any story that seems to want to, or follow any person who seems to claim to want to diminish their power, whether they have that ability or not, right? I'll believe that they're aliens if that lets me like hate them a little bit more easily or something, right?
Because well, it dehumanizes, right? It takes away that the guilt that you have over thinking that another person of your same species is lower,
and allows for a common enemy that's easier to collectively hate as well. Yeah,
like I see it in the vaccine protests that have occurred, right? Things that have zero basis in any rational kind of thinking, but can very easily be linked to these people who clearly don't care about my suppressed wages and the cost of living are telling me to now put this thing in me. I'm not going to listen to them, right? If that makes them mad, if that sticks it to them, then yeah, that's where I'm going to go, right? And I think in some way David Icke is the realist alien because we live in the world to an extent that he has heralded, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a new phenomenon to hate the elite, right? Those that have that much power over you. But I think one of the things that the 20th century brought to us is the expanding publicity and access to media that an individual has, right? Somebody who 1,000 years ago lived under a tyrant king probably had feelings about that tyrant king that he couldn't do anything about, couldn't say anything about because he couldn't read or write. But through the 20th century, now today, like all it takes is a couple of thumbs and a smartphone, and you can post anything you want.
Yep.
And it's definitely not new to hate the elite, but I think the novel kind of thing about this, and you kind of said it, Don, right, is that because the reason why this elite is so powerful and evil is now outside of our control, outside of my hands. Right. Therefore, I don't have to actually do anything about it, right? Like it used to be the mine workers would grab a bunch of guns and, shoot the people trying to break the strike and stuff, right? They would actually fight the people in power. They could at least agree upon, hey, the person in power is vulnerable, right? He is not invincible. But now, if he's an alien,
it alleviates my sense of incapacity because it's not that someone else is more successful because they worked harder or had more benefits than I did. It's because they're a completely different creature.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a ironic way, it's the most powerful tool of the elite, right? To cloak themselves in this fictional story of their own invincibility.
Indeed.
Can we bring it back to the greatest tale of aliens? And
is this Ridley Scott again?
no, this one's not Ridley Scott. This is the X-Files.
Prometheus.
X-Files. Oh yeah, Prometheus was pretty good. I could defend that a little
Take us
bit.
to X-Files, Doug.
Just for a moment, for anybody not familiar, I brought up Scully earlier, but any not familiar with the show, the dynamic and what I believe made that show so successful, why I enjoyed it so much is, of course, you had two FBI agents, one of them being the conspiratorial Mulder, who was so focused on, for sure, there is alien life. I've seen it so many different times, but I work under this tyrannical government structure that doesn't allow me to do it. And Mulder, who was sent there to keep him under wraps and make sure that he isn't going too wild with what he's doing. And of course, the dynamic of the show plays off of the constant, we're being exposed to things. And then Scully tries to find a rational explanation. And Mulder says, how could you possibly see that from what we just saw? And at various times they range between, Scully and Mulder, kind of Mulder being put under the thumb and going like, maybe the things that I see, I don't have a rational basis. And then at that time, Scully is like, there's for sure alien life because of what we've just done. Point of the story is,
don't leave out the raging sexual tension.
Yes, of course. That is a very big part of, I think, yeah, especially for that era. Right. But, I think it was, and this, Don, since you have access, if you remember, I believe it was Mulder's brother. I think that this is where it all stems from, is Mulder's brother was suddenly gone. Like suddenly
disappeared.
Yes, suddenly disappeared. Is this correct?
Supposedly killed by the smoking man.
You spoiled it. That comes later.
Whoa, you told me to look.
That comes later. No. Yes, but in the beginning, he believes, I don't remember if it's abduction, but he just has constant flashbacks to, no, it had to be something else. And of course, he has the famous poster in his office that says, I want to believe. And I think that for the unexplainable, or this can't be this, or this is so terrible that I can't connect to this, it does tend to push this idea of alien or foreign. It's beyond comprehension, because if it becomes this, then at least I can focus on this. And at times it's anxiety. At times it can turn into racism or pain, but it's fascinating to me that people will continue the cycle of, I need to put something in place to explain the miseries or anxieties of life because it is too great. And I think it speaks to our human character, because we are so, there is something almost unexplainable about the amount of pain and anguish and also the joy and exuberance that we go through as human beings. And I think that the alien is a great way to express that, because it's, if there's something even beyond us, then how I interact with that becomes even a more human experience, even though it is alien.
And it's that filter that your culture, your brain puts on your experience because of your culture,
right,
that I find really interesting, because we started the episode talking about the ancient Sumerians and the way that the ancient people understood these phenomenon is different than the way that a Victorian person explains that phenomenon.
Right.
And it's different than the way that a modern person explains that phenomenon. But that doesn't change the phenomenon. It just changes the explanation. And you can see that even between the Eastern and Western perspectives. In the Western perspective, like you point out, Ron, we tend to think of aliens as a mid-20th century sort of invention, technology, and a Cold War anxiety. But from earlier times, Eastern cultures tend to look at it like alien encounters, or the things that we would describe as alien encounters are described in terms of dragons in Chinese culture, and in Japanese culture, it's peaceful visitations,
spirits, right?
And but then if you just focus on that Western culture, to circle back to the fairies that we were talking about a little while ago, those same, like I say, the same phenomenon are just get filtered through that culture. And there's a name for that. There's a folklorists call it cultural morphing, which means that you have an experience and then your culture tells you how to interpret that experience. So for ancient people, it would be the gods, and it's anxiety over natural forces. And then we get to the medieval period, and it's demons and witches and Christianity, the enemies of Christianity. And then the Victorian period, it's fairies. And then we get to the aliens in the 20th century as our sort of explanation for the anxieties that we have. And I think you did a really good job of walking us through how that anxiety in the 20th century sort of evolves from the peaceful Nordic visitors to telling us to be peaceful to the reptilians who are destroying our planet. So,
and I can't wait to see what comes next. Honestly, I hope our next alien visitors are kinder, fuzzier. I can't wait to see Gen Z's aliens, I guess.
That was actually one you were bringing up, that especially the early 20th century stories tend to mimic cultural representations that happen right before. But then I'm thinking, like what Doug says, like, I haven't heard a story of someone being abducted by a xenomorph, or with what was the movie a few years ago that was nominated for Best Picture?
Alien movie?
Yeah, where they're trying to figure out the language.
Oh, yeah,
Arrival.
They're squid, right?
Yeah,
and like nobody has
tetrapods
a squid story, right? Where they've been so. That seems to be shifting a little bit. Like the alien abduction story still relies on the gray or the reptilian or the Nordic. We haven't moved past those in our encounters stories that I know of. Do you?
No, there has to be, I think, like a sort of magic culmination of variables, right? It
seems like it.
That it needs to be a standout image, popular, everyone saw it, but also in some way reflect, like we were saying, the anxieties of the time or the concerns of people. And I think, I agree. The xenomorph to me has never been an alien. He's just a monster. Like, to me, Alien is a great monster movie. It's not It's not about aliens, actually. That's my biggest problem with it, is that the movie called Alien is the least about aliens of any alien movie I've seen.
It's the most about aliens. It's called Alien.
It should just be called Scream in Space or something.
It's just
In
the same
space,
movie
no one
over
can
and
hear
over
you
again.
scream. Come back for the next episode where I rip someone's head off over my favorite horror movie franchise.
Thank you guys for taking this trip in a saucer with me. Thank you, Uncannibals out there, for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Until next time, please send us in all of your strange phenomenon so that we can explain them and psychoanalyze you as well.
Thanks, Ron. This was super interesting.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, folks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Wait. Hey, Uncannibals, sorry. We were having so much fun pontificating about humanity and the nature of the supernatural that we completely forgot we promised to tell you what we all thought about whether or not aliens have visited the Earth.
We voted and wrote it all down, and then we just left it on the
Yeah, we were like, whatever. That's not the most interesting thing here. So who wants to go first? Well, we wrote down what we thought each of us believed, right? About our two questions?
About the two questions. The first question was, do aliens exist in the universe?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the second question is, have aliens visited the Earth?
I believe that both of you think they exist.
I definitely think they exist. I put down that I think Doug believes they exist because he literally told me, and I also
Imagine you go the other
and
way.
I put down that Don does not think aliens exist because he was incredibly cryptic and withholding the entire time.
Don't let that mistake you. He's great at being secretive.
You noticed? I feel so special. I feel so seen.
By aliens.
I have to actually. I waffle on this, so
I'm winning this one.
I think
Waffler.
I think my current belief is no. I think that's like within like the last month or so.
What?
Whoa,
What happened in the last
what
month
the
to
heck?
destroy your belief?
Come on, man. Where'd the hope go?
I was reading an article that
No,
discussed this very thing.
it's not about articles. It's about fun. So
Yeah.
please.
But I did put that you both believe in aliens.
Thank you. You
Yeah.
know us
Wait,
well.
what was this article? You can't just leave it there.
It was about the Fermi paradox and the mathematics of that the original calculation for the Fermi paradox was wildly off, and that it's not that unusual that maybe we are the only ones in the universe. So
I always thought the answer to the Fermi paradox was just the immense distances, like sort of
it exists, and we
underestimates the distance of space.
Right. And so, but now they're saying that might not be the case, and that maybe it's much more unlikely that life has existed anywhere else. So
Cool article.
So like I'm
Don.
waffling. Like I'm not waving a flag for it. I'm just like I don't know. So
That's boring though.
Yeah.
In terms of, and then the next one was UFOs. We've been visited, correct?
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
it doesn't
yes.
have to necessarily be. So this is what's interesting is now, obviously, I don't think you do. But here's what I have for Dawn. So on my paper, I have a scratched out. I have Dawn. No, scratched out. Like I decided the last second, I was like, maybe he does. And I said yes to both of you. I said yes at the end. But now I know it's no. So
I think that's a perfect representation of what I just said. That I waffle between the two.
So do you feel even more seen? That's the most accurate representation. Yeah.
I put that Doug does believe we have been visited by aliens. And I put
Shocker.
that Dawn does not believe we've been visited by aliens.
Yeah.
And I put that that Ron does not believe we've been visited by aliens, and I put that Doug absolutely believes we've been visited by aliens because Doug believes that wrestling is real. So he believes everything.
So I definitely didn't say that, folks. If you go back to the wrestling episode, I did explain kayfabe. So let's just not get it twisted. But yeah, what'd you say, Ron?
I do not believe aliens have visited us. I think they exist, but I think there are too many rational explanations for the UFO sightings in general across the last couple of decades.
And I'd like to clarify, like, I think visitation doesn't necessarily mean, because we're also assuming they visited people. And I don't necessarily think that that would be the case. If anything, I think that they would make an incredibly safe trip not visiting like human beings. I think if we go back to the zoo theory, if you will, I think they would look at what we do to each other and go, I'll take, the most remote location and go there if we're going to go anywhere.
I don't know. I feel like if they saw video games, they'd be like, okay.
Oh, Space Invaders. Yeah, look, they like to shoot us. Let's go
EVE
visit
Online.
them.
EVE Online. They make corporations in space instead of...
How fun.
Yeah. No, well, Doom is pretty good. I know. We got to talk about Doom in one of these episodes.
I think that you're right, though, Doug. I think if I believe that aliens have visited, I'm a current fan of the zoo theory, and that are like the prime directive. Like if they visited, they would take caution to make sure that we don't know that they visited.
Yeah.
So
Okay, boys.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a safe and happy rest of your day or night. Bye.
bye.